All right, Cassidy.
I'm so glad that you guys are all here today to watch Devin speak. I've known Devin for a long time. I often would say that she is what I call a doer. When she sees a problem, she steps up and she figures out how to make it better. When she saw women in extreme poverty in Uganda and Kampala many years ago, she and her mom and a couple of friends jumped in. And from that, they developed a business called Bead for Life, which Devin was a co-founder and the ED. In that journey, she found her passion, which was ending extreme poverty, and she became an international speaker and an expert and an advocate, I would say, on extreme poverty, and also a friend. So I'm really glad to introduce Devin Hibbard, who's here to talk about Street Business School. Devin, please take it away.
Thank you, Cassidy. Thank you for that lovely introduction. I'm going to just see if I can share my screen. Does everybody see that? Yes, great. So I'm really delighted to be here with you today. I'm going to talk about entrepreneurship and also really the power of belief and how important the marriage of those two things are. Oh no. So in the last 20 years, I've lived in a lot of cities and I've had a chance to speak with over a dozen Rotary clubs. And I just want to say before I dive in that I really love the mission of Rotary. And I think that you all are often unsung heroes. The incredible networks and power that you bring to creating change around the world, I think is profound. And so I'm a big fan of the work that Rotary does. So my story begins back in 2004 when I found myself in Uganda. You can see a map here of Africa and where Uganda is within Africa. I ended up living about 5 of the last 15 years in Uganda with my family. And during that time, even had a chance to engage with the Muyenga Rotary Club, which is the oldest Rotary Club in all of East Africa, and a friend of mine is a dear member. So that was quite an adventure, but I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Let me tell you how I ended up here. It all started with a woman named Millie Grace Akena. In 2004, my mom, who Cassidy has mentioned, and a dear family friend of ours named Ginny Jordan, who some of you may know because she's also from Boulder, were in Kampala, and we met Millie as we were walking through a slum community. Millie had a strip of paper she was rolling in her hands on the front step of this very tiny mud house. And we stopped to ask her what she was doing. And she explained to us that she had learned how to make jewelry out of recycled paper. But she didn't have any markets for her jewelry. And instead, she and her 5 children worked every day in a rock quarry, pounding rocks into smaller rocks and pebbles and sand for sale into the local construction industry. And for this, the entire family earned about 65 cents a day. We had walked past this rock quarry and there's dust in the air and it's 100 degrees and there's children 3, 4, 5 years old who are pounding rocks. And when she told us this story and showed us these beautiful jewelry products she had made, we thought, perhaps we could do something to help Millie and other women in her community. So we bought a couple beads, we bought some necklaces and some jewelry, and we went back to the States. Fast forward 6 months, and we were fortunate enough through a connection to get a tiny article in O magazine. This is a powerful woman. You probably all know that, but this lady is not to be messed with. Because of this small article, we sold $90,000 worth of jewelry in 6 weeks. We were shocked, we were stunned, we were surprised. And because of that, we started an organization called Bead for Life. Some of you may have heard of Bead for Life. We've been headquartered in Colorado for many, many years. We started Bead for Life with a couple really core values. The values of dignity and enhancing human dignity in the people that we served. The value of sustainability, which in our mind really meant equipping people with skills to help them be self-sufficient themselves forever after in the market and not depend on us forever. And the value of impact. We really wanted to see measurable change in people's lives. Because of these values, we ended up launching a business training program within Bead for Life. The idea was that rather than training one group of 100 women and working with them for year after year after year, we instead would work with these women to take the money that they were earning from their jewelry and to use it to start a small business based in the local economy that didn't require an export market. So we were helping them start secondary businesses that were selling used shoes or vegetables or whatever it is that they wanted. And eventually we took this curriculum, this training program, and we started training people who did not make a bead for us, make any jewelry for us at all. That organization became a second nonprofit a couple years ago that's headquartered right here in Niwot called Street Business School. Street Business School marries entrepreneurial training with confidence building in order to help women transform their lives. So what does that look like? We have 8 modules of business that we train women in to help them start their small businesses. You can see what those modules are here. Our program is delivered over a 6-month period, and it's offered in the local communities, in the local classroom, and it's offered in the local language. And all of these concepts that you're seeing on your screen are things that you might find in any business school in the world, right? They're fundamentals of business. What makes Street Business School unique is that we have figured out to target these to the needs of women living in extreme poverty. So one example is that many of the women that we work with have never finished primary school. So a lot of them can't read and write. So we figured out ways to make these lessons accessible, and I want to give you one example. Bookkeeping is a fundamental skill to have if you're an entrepreneur. If you don't know if you're making money or losing money, it's hard to run a successful business, right? So we have 3 strategies of teaching people bookkeeping in our program. The first is a paper-based system where you're writing down your expenses and your income, and you can do a little bit of analysis. The second is a paper-based system, simply money in, money out, right? Am I making money? The third, if you are illiterate, a paper-based system is not going to help you. So the third is an apron. We teach women how to sew themselves an apron. And if you're the owner of a vegetable stand, let's say you're selling tomatoes and eggplants, you are going to sew 2 pockets onto your apron. In the morning when you buy your stock of eggplants, you're going to take money out of your pocket, you're going to pay for your stock, and then throughout the day as you sell eggplants, you're going to put money back in that pocket. At the end of the day, you're going to know a couple really important things. You're going to know, did I make money or lose money on my eggplant? And you're going to know, are my eggplants or my tomatoes more profitable? So simple systems like this that are necessary to help people who are living at the base of the economic pyramid to be successful. And each of these concepts has activities like that. It's very interactive, it's very gamified. We want people to be able to remember things. So we have studied the pedagogy of how do you create sticky content, and we've embedded it into our training model. So that knowledge base is the first important part of Street Business School. But the second important piece is the power of belief. Because what I've seen is that all the knowledge in the world is not helpful to someone if they don't believe that they can take it and do something with it. I'd like for you to meet Ruth. Ruth is a woman who has gone through our program. Before she met Street Business School, Ruth was living in pretty significant poverty. Her son, Bashir, who you can see here in this picture, was just an infant at the time, and Bashir's father had left the family. And Ruth every single day worked hard to try and figure out how she could provide for her son. What she would do is she would go through the local neighborhood and she would ask people if she could wash their laundry. On days that she found someone who needed their laundry washed, she would make 50 or 60 or 70 cents, and she and Bashir would have one small meal. She told me later that days that she didn't get any laundry, she would try and go to sleep listening to her son cry, and that she had no hope for her future. She just didn't know what she was going to do to be able to create a future for her child. Around that time, Ruth met Street Business School, and she learned that she could start a business. And she started this very tiny vegetable stall that you see behind us. She worked hard, she kept learning, she took the concepts of Street Business School. Eventually, she not only started her vegetable stand, but she realized that if she traveled one day a week, very early in the morning, got a neighbor to watch Bashir, she'd go 2 hours by bus to the rural area where she could buy wholesale vegetables. And she could then increase her profit margin because she was paying less. Not only did she feed that into her own vegetable stall, but she realized she could wholesale the vegetables to her neighbors who also had vegetable stalls. So now she's diversified her income a little bit, and she's created more success. Because of that, Ruth took her income from $22 a month to $177 a month. I asked Ruth later what had been the most important thing she had learned. Here's what she said. She used a Luganda word. She said, obutenyoma. Obutenyoma literally translates not underestimating myself. And I thought it was amazing that for this woman who had taken all these business concepts, the most important thing she had learned was to not underestimate herself. And that's when I really saw that the transformation that can happen really lives in the intersection of belief in oneself and knowledge. Once you know something, you need the belief to put it into action. So that's what we've seen, is really that it is a marriage of these two. But we're not just talking about women feeling good about themselves and having a nice warm fuzzy experience. I told you we care deeply about impact. So what we have tracked over these almost 15, 16 years is the transformation in somebody's income that comes when they go through Street Business School. We know that when people start in our program, they're earning $1.35 a day. That is defined by the international community as extreme poverty. And it's hard for you and I living in Boulder to understand what that means. When you're living on $1.35 a day, you are probably not eating 3 meals a day. Your family is probably skipping meals every day, every week in order to stretch that amount of money. It also means that your kids are probably not in school. The practice of having to pay school fees, or even if you can go to a government school, having to buy a pair of shoes prohibits many families from being able to access education. It also means that families are having to make incredibly difficult choices maybe to get the health care that your child needs when they fall sick and access AIDS drugs to keep yourself alive. Choices that really no family should ever have to make. That's what it means to live in extreme poverty. So those are the population that we're serving every single day. What we know from our evaluation data is that within 6 months of our program finishing, so when people finish our program, they've increased their income 54%. I told you though that we really care about sustainability. And in our minds, lifting someone out of poverty in 6 months only to see them slide back into poverty a year or two later is not sustainable. So we care a lot about measuring the long-term impact. And what we know is that when we go back 2 full years after someone has graduated, not only has their income stayed steady, but it's increased. 211% growth from baseline to 2 years later. And people are able to earn an average of $4.19 a day. which is above the global poverty line defined by the international community. So it's a pretty significant change in what somebody's life and circumstance is. So we had this very successful program in Uganda, and yet we looked at the global statistics. 5-10 years ago, 1 out of every 10 people on the planet was living in extreme poverty. And though we were serving hundreds of people a year through Bead for Life and then Street Business School, thousands of people, we knew that 700 million people on the planet were struggling to survive in extreme poverty. So we thought about how to scale, and about 7 years ago launched an expansion that now is in 21 countries around the world, with our goal of reaching 1 million women by 2027. I want to tell you a little bit about our strategy. We have adopted a social franchise strategy. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of social franchising, but you've certainly heard of franchising. It's a strategy we stole from the business sector to take a proven product, or in our case, a proven training model, and to spread it by working with other franchisees. The reason we adopted this model is because I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all solution to poverty eradication. What works in Uganda is going to look different from what will work in South Africa or Cambodia or Honduras. And so our strategy is really to find that local partner, that local organization who already is working in the community, knows the circumstances, knows the politics, knows the gender norms, and we work with them to equip them with our model, with our program, but they bring their local expertise. So it's really this beautiful marriage of those two pieces that creates something that is bigger than the sum of the parts. We are not only partnering with organizations who are doing poverty eradication. In fact, we recently mapped our partners, 98 partners in those 21 countries, and they are working on 15 of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. So we're working with organizations that are addressing healthcare and children's literacy and domestic violence. We have been doing this work right up until last January. We were on this amazing growth path and trajectory. And then, of course, the world turned upside down. The economic crisis that is on the heels of the health pandemic that we're facing is significant. We've already seen that 2 billion people have seen decreased earnings around the world. 2 billion people. And the latest numbers from the World Bank show that 150 million additional people are going to be pushed into extreme poverty because of the economic crisis caused by COVID-19. That's erasing years and years, decades of progress that the global community has made against extreme poverty. So Street Business School in the last 10 months has been digging in to do more than we have ever done before. The reality of COVID and the economic crisis that's being created by COVID is that what is going to be needed is a focus on a couple things. Number one, women are disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. They are more likely to have lost jobs, low-wage jobs. They're more likely to be forced back into poverty. Number two, all these jobs that are lost are not coming back anytime soon. So people are going to have to figure out how to survive and thrive in the informal sector. And that is where Street Business School is positioned to make an impact. And number three, we believe it's really important to focus on dignity, on helping people help themselves. Street Business School is not a handout. It is not a one-time, it's not an ongoing intervention. It's really about that pride that a woman has when she knows she is meeting her own needs and the needs of her family. But beyond Street Business School, I really feel like there's an opportunity. We are certainly being bold. We are innovating at Street Business School, but I think that there's a real opportunity as an entire community as Rotary, you know, the way we think about doing things, to not only get back to normal, but to leapfrog normal and get to better. And that's really what we're doing. We're thinking about all the different ways that Street Business School can dig in, and that we can partner with other people to think about new and innovative ways to help people lift themselves out of poverty in a way that's sustainable. So I want to stop talking. I think the most interesting part of any presentation is the questions that come afterwards. And I know that all of you have amazing ideas and resources. But before I do, I would just invite you, if there are things that I've said today that you're curious about or would like to do more, there's lots of ways to get engaged with us. One is that we are looking for partner organizations around the world. And I know this is an incredibly global community here at the Boulder Rotary. If you know an organization that you think would like to partner with Street Business School, who could use entrepreneurial training to enhance their impact, we'd love to talk to them. We also are always looking for volunteers who are inspired to help our work. And of course, particularly right now, as we head into the end of the year, if you are inspired to support our work, we have an annual appeal going right now, and I'm happy to talk to you about that. So lots of different ways to get engaged. We are igniting the spark of belief in entrepreneurship around the world, and would love your partnership in any way that feels right to you. So let me stop and see what questions you have. If you don't get a chance to answer your question, to ask your question in this time, I've also put my email here, and you're very welcome to get in touch with me.
Hey, Devin, thank you so much. Already, I have at least 4 questions for you. So what I'm going to do is start by calling on Bill Anderson, who had a great question for you based on some of the work you're doing in the other countries. Bill?
Hi, Devin. Thanks so much for coming to speak with us today. This is a really inspiring talk. I wanted to learn a little bit more about your instructors and how many of them there are and how they're trained to train others. And also a little bit more maybe about your source of funding. I know I read that you generate about half of the revenue, but I'm curious about how you take in the rest.
Great questions, Bill. Thank you. Are you the one in Costa Rica?
I am, yes.
Okay. I'm really happy to come down there and talk about this in person if you'd like.
You know.
Who are our trainers? So our trainers are primarily African staff members who have been doing this for years and years and years and really helped build our curriculum. They are what we call our master trainers. When we partner with another organization, another nonprofit that's let's say working in Zambia or in Kenya, we actually bring their staff members to what we call an immersion workshop. And in that workshop, we're training them in everything that they need to create their own street business school in their own community. It includes the 8 modules, how to train the 8 modules. But it also includes a lot about the coaching. How do we help build confidence in people? So it really combines those 2 pieces, what we've learned over 20 years of how do you help people gain confidence. And then the other thing that we do, we think is really important is that we co-brand. We give them all the materials, we give them all the curriculum, everything they're going to need. But we co-brand everything so that there's that ownership. So it would be Street Business School by Boulder Rotary Club if we were working with Boulder Rotary Club, and all the materials are going to have their name on it. We think that that's a really important thing. In the era of COVID, we've recently launched a virtual training. And so we've launched, it's an 8-week program, in-depth program where over Zoom, we are training staff members how to take this training into their local communities. This is important for us both because we know people can't travel, and because, as I said, there's more need than ever. And so our ability to train people virtually is going to be an important part of the next couple years. So that's question number one. Question number two was on our earned revenue. So the earned revenue that you quoted was for Bead for Life. Bead for Life and Street Business School are separate entities. In fact, Bead for Life closed this past year, so it's just Street Business School. Right now, we have both an earned income stream that's about 10% of our overall revenue, and that's from fees paid to us by NGOs that get trained. And then the remaining amount is philanthropic contributions through individuals, foundations, and we have a couple corporate partners. So that's how our work is funded.
Great, great. Thank you, Devin. Thank you, Bill. The second question comes from Ben. Ben, can you unmute and ask your great question?
Thank you. And thank you, Devin. That was a very exciting presentation that you just gave us. So a little bit about me. I'm fourth generation Detroit area. My mom was a teacher in an impoverished area, and my dad was a bankruptcy attorney. And so a lot of my curiosity is I see a lot of opportunities where a model like this could work in an area that probably doesn't meet the definition of extreme poverty, but definitely would find a lot of value in the work that you're doing. And I'm wondering if your team has looked at different ways to prioritize or to franchise it in areas that may not necessarily be in Africa, but still would find a lot of value in the work that you're doing.
Yeah. So the 21 countries that we're currently in are mostly in Africa, but we're in 3 countries in Latin America and 2 countries in Asia. And I get this question a lot, Ben, like, when are you coming to the US? Here's my response. The beauty of this model is that it's not us, it's not Street Business School going into a place that we don't know and setting up shop, because there's so many differences in culture and gender norms and religious norms. We really rely on that partner to lead the customization to make it effective. I would love to go to Detroit or you know, wherever, but we would have to find the right partner who could help us understand how do we customize it for that local community, and they would be the people teaching it. The biggest barrier that I see with coming to a wealthier country is that we actually don't give any startup capital with Street Business School. We are literally teaching women to start with usually between $4 and $12. And we teach them to raise that money in their local community through washing clothes like Ruth did or other things. We do that because we feel like if they hit a stumbling block, as people inevitably do, and their business closes, that if they got a loan for $100, they're like, oh, I'll never get another $100, right? And now I'm stuck. If they started with $7 and started something tiny, tiny and built it over time, they know they can do that again. So the biggest barrier in coming to the US is that you can't start with $12. You have to have some capital infusion to start even a small business. But I'm sure there's somebody smarter than me who works in these communities who could lead that. So Ben, please send your referrals. I'd love to have a conversation. If you know of groups doing great work, we're happy to have that conversation.
Thanks, Devin. Someone you may know, Mike Brady, are you ready? Can you unmute and ask your question?
I'm all unmuted, and I love your talk, Devin. I just feel so proud to know you for over 25 years, and everything, you just absolutely wonderful. My question is very similar to Ben's, so maybe you've answered it already, which was, are you going to expand not to the United States, but more South America, Asia, any plans, or what would need to happen in order for the technology that you're perfecting there in Africa to go to the other very poor places in the world, you know, outside of the United States? Yeah.
We are intending to expand. Our next target market for expansion is Asia. And what we are doing, what we are in the process of doing is really having a bunch of advisors from the Asia region work with us. We have 2 partners in Asia who we're calling anchor partners, and they're testing the curriculum and helping us iterate so that it is generally applicable to the Asia region. Now, having said that, Asia is a huge place and there's so many differences within different countries in Asia that's where the local customization again happens, led by the local partner. But the virtual training that we've just launched is giving us opportunities to expand more rapidly in some other areas. And so we're actually now looking at, could we take our virtual training and get it into Spanish so that opens a whole new market in Latin America. So yes is the answer, but we're not quite sure exactly what it looks like yet.
Cool beans.
Okay, thank you.
All right, John Sullivan, we're now getting an avalanche of really good questions. So I'm going to try to go as quickly as we can. John Sullivan, can you ask your question real quick?
Yes, thanks, Cassidy. Devin, I can, crunch the numbers, even though I'm not a mathematician, and see that 419 a day is a 310% increase over 135 a day in your statistics. But can you give us a little more detail on what that increase in income allows a person to do that they couldn't do before?
Yeah, that's such a great question. Again, it's kind of hard living here in the United States. $4.19 still sounds like not very much money. The best analogy I can give is imagine that you're making 135 grand a year in a job, and 2 years later you're making 419. It's a big change in terms of what you could do in the United States with that quantum of change. $4.19 mean families are eating regular meals. They're probably eating more protein in their diets on a regular basis. When you're on $1.35, you're eating mostly carbohydrates. It means that children are definitely in school. What we've seen consistently is that women, particularly, the very first thing they prioritize is getting their kids in school. The value of education is so strong. And it means access to regular health care, right? It means that you're able to treat yourself and your child who gets sick. It means that you're not having to choose which of your kids you're going to get health care for. So those are the first couple things that women immediately invest in. But it also means that you're able to grow over time in terms of savings and reinvesting in your business, things like that. The other thing that I would say, which is a lot harder to measure, John, is that the sense of dignity and pride that a woman has who has a successful business or 2 or 3 businesses is hard to measure, but is incredibly important. Imagine the experience of a child who's growing up living in absolute poverty versus a child who sees their mom making money every day. The way that shifts the gender dynamics in the family, the way that child grows up feeling like, wow, my family's doing something, and the messages that they're getting. So there's this very hard to capture, but equally important phenomena that happens when a woman increases her income by that amount.
Cool,
Thank you.
Thanks, Devin. Jim Radowski has a good question. Jim, can you unmute?
Yes, Devin, thank you so much for speaking to our club today. I was wondering, what is your annual budget? How much money do you raise from franchise fees, if that's the right word, from your partners on the ground? And how much do you raise from donors in the United States? And how do you spend the money?
Yeah. I am happy on our website. You can see all these details in our annual report. Our budget this year is just under $2 million. And about 10% of that we're projecting to raise through franchise fees. Although one of the impacts of COVID is that it has really hurt many, many nonprofits. And so we are looking at that really hard and wondering, this service is needed more than ever. And for many organizations, they're less able to pay for it than they have been in the past. So we're really looking at our commitment to make it available to organizations that are committed, but also to have some skin in the game. How do we spend that money? Again, this is broken down in much smaller detail in our annual report that you can find on our website, which is streetbusinessschool.org. A lot of that is spent on actually the trainings that we do of partners, that in-person training, now the virtual training. We also invest heavily in a network. Once an organization is Street Business School certified, we want to keep them close to us and we want to continue to support their implementation. So we have quarterly calls. We had hoped to do our first conference of these organizations around the world, bring them all together this year. Of course, that wasn't able to happen. But we want them to be successful and we want them to be resilient, not only in their delivery of Street Business School, but their ability to be excellent as an organization. And so we invest in that. We invest in our monitoring and evaluation. So those are a couple things that we have prioritized in our budget.
Thank you.
Cool. We were going to call on Nancy Chinwagner, but you answered her question. So I'm going to move on to Sam Pottinger. Are you ready to unmute and ask your question, Sam?
Yes, again, she did answer some of my thoughts, but maybe more to the nuts and bolts of this, Devin. How many people are employed? Do you have a physical plant? How are the volunteers dovetailed into your operations?
Okay, Sam, let me answer and then come back if I didn't exactly get what you were asking. We have about 26 staff in two primary locations. One is here in Colorado. The other is in Kampala, Uganda. It's a little bit more in Uganda than here. In addition, we have 221 people who have been certified to deliver Street Business School through this franchise model. Those people are in the 21 countries that are where Street Business School is being offered, and they are working with those partner organizations. So those are not our direct staff. It's one of the things I think this is such a beautiful model, is it's incredibly cost effective because we're basically training people in other organizations to implement the program. In terms of volunteers, were you asking about volunteers here in the US?
I was just curious how that fits in, how it dovetails into your operations.
Yeah, so we have volunteers support us in lots of different ways. We have an advisory committee that brings people with different skill sets. From time to time, we'll put together sort of special advisory groups. For example, our Asia expansion group with people who have expertise from Asia. We're always looking for people who want to do pro bono work in legal or accounting or other areas like that. And we also have something that we have lots of people around the country who host global ambassador events where they bring together their community. Right now it's happening virtually to share the work of Street Business School with their community and help other people understand what we're doing. So those are a couple ways that people engage with us.
How about Beads for Life? That would be a street business. Why is that now out of business?
So Street Business, Bead for Life had 3 or 4 or 5 different sales outlets, strategies. And when COVID hit last March, pretty much all of those went to zero. So unfortunately, it was just an issue of the ability to continue to sell those products in the era of COVID was not sustainable.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Devin. I am going to call on Judy next. Judy, you ready?
Yeah, I had to unmute. I'm merely curious whether you have an operation in Guinea-Bissau.
We don't yet. Do you have some connections there, Judy?
Yeah, my niece is the economic development director there. I mean, it's very small, but she's very involved in the community. She says she's one of the few white people who are accepted. And
I would love
in all sorts of ways.
Yeah, if she maybe send her our website, and if she thinks it's interesting, I'd love an introduction.
Okay.
I
Well,
can
there-
help with
Thank
that too, if you guys
Mhm.
need it. All right, I'm going to call on iPhone, and I know you introduced yourself earlier, but I can't remember who it was. I'm so sorry.
Yes, sorry, I was trying to figure out how to change my name, but my name is Rachel Silbert. I am Nancy Guyer's daughter. Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Great. Thank you, Devin, for this interesting talk. My question was with regard to potential gender issues, gender violence or whatnot, as it sounds like Street Business School is targeted predominantly to women, if not solely to women. And obviously it's inspiring to be empowering them and whatnot, but it certainly changes dynamics within communities that are oftentimes quite patriarchal. And so I'm curious how you address that and if you've encountered any issues.
Definitely putting money in women's hands can spark a complicated gender relationship. And we've definitely seen that there has been some, violence within families. The way we have dealt with that is we have a counselor that works with us, so that if we hear from a woman that there's something going on in her family, that we're able to provide some resources. But this is another reason why we really rely on the local partner, right? We don't have a one size fits all. So what works in northern Nigeria, where it's very rural and Muslim, is going to be really different from the slums of Kenya. And so the expertise of that local partner is really an important component of this. And we talk a lot about, how do we minimize the risk to women? In some communities, for example, the organization has decided that bringing all the men or the husbands in advance to orient them and tell them what the women are participating in is a really critical part of the program. So those are the kind of adaptations that help reduce the incidence of any sorts of gender-based violence. And I can say that when women have economic resources, if they are in an unsafe situation, they now have an opportunity to make the choice of what's safe for them and their children. Whereas when they don't have economic resources, they have to stay or not eat. And so, it really does create more options for the woman to make sure that she's safe.
Great, thank you.
Cool, thank you, Rachel. Thanks, Devin. The next question comes from Meryl Glustrom. I think you were part of the Watson Institute, so you may know Meryl already.
I know Meryl's son.
Yes, everybody
too-
knows Meryl's son before Meryl, so it's not surprising. But a great program and worthy of Watson, so thank you. And I have two questions. One is, in what ways have you tied into microloans to help the entrepreneurial efforts you get started? And two, how has the program been affected either positively or negatively by local and national government?
Yeah, great questions. So microloans, it's not an official part of the 6-month curriculum. What we have found is that microloans have a very mixed reputation in Uganda. A lot of people feel like microloans, once they take a microloan, they, are at risk of losing everything they have if they are not able to pay the loans.
Yeah.
And there's some cases where that's borne out. So we have preferred to help people learn how to grow their business from a very small initial investment to growing over time. And that's really our preference, because we think not only is it safer and more acceptable to the communities, but it helps build that resiliency I was speaking to earlier. However, there is a point where an established business does need more cash in order to get to that next level. So the way we have done it in Uganda is we have an alumni gathering periodically where all Street Business School graduates can come back. It's an amazing day of peer learning and celebration and storytelling. But one of the things we do is we bring in lots of vendors who are providing business services so that women can talk to a microfinance bank, for example, to see if it's the right fit for them. In terms of government, There's pluses and minuses in working with government. We've had some incredible support on the local level from local elected officials helping us find the right participants, promote the program, connect us to the right folks. We have not been as actively engaged with national government. There's just so many politics, if you'll excuse the term, of understanding how to work well with them. We are considering working more closely with governments, but really in countries where the governments have been responsive and where there's less corruption. So that's sort of how we've navigated that working relationship. There's definitely a lot of opportunity, but a lot of risk is our take on it.
Yeah. I have some connections through Eric to the Ugandan government, so
great.
Contact me.
Thank you.
Hey, Devin, I have a question of my own. So I actually have two questions. So I'll start with this one. Like, you've described how SPS works on a ground level. How is it different than some of the other entrepreneurship programs that are out there?
I would say that there's two things that I think are most unique about Street Business School. One is very few other entrepreneurial programs are targeting people in extreme poverty. There's many, many entrepreneurial programs that are looking at people who already have businesses that are maybe employing 5 to 10 staff members and looking at how you grow those to create additional jobs, or are targeted at people who have graduated from secondary school or university. So there's lots of great work out there, but I would say the target focus that we have is women living in extreme poverty, and there's very few people who are doing that. The other thing that I would think makes us unique, quite frankly, is just the impact that we have data that supports. Helping people triple their income and move out of extreme poverty, you don't find that level of impact in lots of other entrepreneurial training programs.
Cool. I'm actually seeing that it's getting very close to our deadline. I want to thank you so much. We have what tradition to end with a responder. So I'm going to call on Darla Shi.
Hi, Devin. Yes, Rotary gets the last word. However, I have to say, I'm finding myself feeling speechless. And the word that comes to mind is wow. Your passion and commitment to your mission is so very obvious and key to your success, I'm sure. And I want to tell you that I had the privilege of working with your dad, Dr. David Hibbard, when he was the medical director at Hospice of Boulder County back in the day. So I know you come from very hearty stock.
Yes, sir. Yes, I do.
I'm very impressed with the marriage of education and training with confidence building, and your core values of dignity, sustainability, and impact are so critical. So congratulations for all that you've done and all that you plan to do. And I anticipate you'll be very, very successful. And one more comment, when I opened my mail last night, I found your very impressive solicitation. At the same time, I was talking with Cass on the phone about being the responder today. So I wish you all the success with that also. And with that, I want you to know that Rotary has had a goal and mission since, back in the mid-'80s, to eradicate polio off the face of the earth. And we are in the home stretch for that effort. And in your honor, we are donating 100 doses of polio vaccine to that effort. So thank you so much for your wonderful and informative presentation today, and all the best.
Thank you so much, Darla. Please, if you didn't get your question, feel free to email me. I think my email is posted in the chat. Thanks for having me today.